Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can I have your name, please?
Nicelle Davis.
Nicole, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Edwin?
Very good. I really love the dress you wear today. What does it represent to you?
Well, um, so what I did is I recognized that I'm a somewhat unhealthy sentimental, and so what happens to me sometimes is I'm given random objects or I identify an object with a moment and I hold on to it for maybe too long. And I think that's something that a lot of us do. We mistake the object for the moment and we're really afraid that our memory will fail us, and so we end up sort of almost um, like the symbol of like the magpie or the crow that collects all of these shiny objects. We start collecting all these shiny objects, and it's kind of a silly attempt to actually hold on to something that we can't, which is time, right? So I mean, most of this memorabilia is like strange little things that my son has given me, and he grows so rapidly and changes so much that it feels almost as if I'm watching someone um, die and then be reborn as a completely new person because he's growing that fast and changing so fast. And so I end up like holding on to all these little relics, and I mean that's kind of like behavior of like hoarders or or it like I'm afraid of it becoming like almost like a neurotic behavior. And so I thought instead of holding on to the stuff, I'd try to turn it into art and process what it means to me and why it means those things. And then I was working with a local artist named Karen Ben Singer, who's an amazing director and cinematographer, and she's working on creating her own web series and making like independent films. She's she's one of us. She's a desert girl who's in the middle of everywhere trying to make something out of nothing, right? And so she was willing to work with me, and we went to a location called Antiques at the Barn, which is up on I and 70th about. And it's this weird place that's a hodgepodge of everyone else's treasures. And it's not necessarily curated in any sensible way. And so you'll have like a Victorian lamp next to Darth Vader, next to the Marshmallow Puff Man, next to the American flag, next to the Confederate flag, next to memorabilia that makes us uncomfortable and uneasy about race and money and politics, next to something that sort of like speaks to the civil rights movement and the more beautiful aspects of being human. And it's all in this sort of hodgepodge giant barn. And it's this weird space where like you're not sure if you're in the middle of your own apocalypse or if you're in a giant treasure chest. And so I wanted to try to make a dress that was like that. And the idea is I'm going to take this dress on the road. So in a week from now, I leave for Boston and New York. And I'll have little poems hidden in all these little boxes and compartments that are in the dress. And I'll have audience members call out where they would like me to pull a poem out of. So like I could pull a poem out of this skeleton hand, or I can pull a poem out of this little treasure chest, this vulgar little treasure chest. And so then that way the audience sort of gets like a choose your own adventure poetry experience in the dress. And like ultimately like all the little pieces in the dress are one poem. And so I kind of wanted to play with the experiment of like you can take one poem and rearrange it in endless ways, and it will reinvent the meaning or the focus or the intention of the poem depending on what line goes in what order.
Okay. You are a published author. How many books do you publish already?
I have 3 books out, and I have 2 books coming out, and I'm shopping 2 books at the moment.
Do you have the names?
The first book is Circe, which is a retelling of the Odyssey, and then the second book is Becoming Judas, which is sort of my reinvention of the Book of Mormon / the Bible. And then In the Circus of You is sort of like looking at Americana and the mythos of America. The book that's coming out is The Walled Up Wife, which is a retelling of a old medieval poem, which is sort of rooted in the idea that in order for there to be a large structure, you have to have a soul to hold the walls up, and so they used to bury people alive in walls. of cathedrals and things. And so it's kind of examining that old ballad. And then the new work that I'm currently working on and trying to stage is a poem in verse. Or a poem in verse? No, that's terrible. Poems are always in verse. No, it's a play in verse. And so it's supposed to be a theatrical performance. And what I'm trying to look at is what happens to the character of Caliban from Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Was that the last play that he wrote?
It is. That's the last. Supposedly, it's the last play that Shakespeare wrote, and his apology for basically taking advantage of all the privilege that life had given him. So it's a weird sort of acknowledgement that lots of different people have to sacrifice and work hard for a few lucky group of people to be artists.